You're listening to The New Paris. I'm your host, Lindsay Tremuta. This month is my 18th December living in Paris. And as I reflect on that time, I'm struck by how much the city still enchants and surprises me. That might be a buzzy neighborhood, a refurbished historical marvel like Notre Dame, a dining experience, or something more unexpected altogether. Someone who is in the business of sussing out and building such unexpected experiences, including some that I've been fortunate to attend, is today's guest, Catherine Down. She's a food writer and travel and event consultant who joins to talk about the most surprising spaces and experiences in Paris, what she finds so meaningful about the city after 12 years as a resident, and what she recommends if you're coming to town this month. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
Well, it's been a few weeks since we last saw each other at a very special event. Speaking of sort of unique experiences that you can have in Paris, we went to La Distillerie de l'Arbre Sec, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's a micro distillery in the first arrondissement where we learned to make gin.
It was fantastic.
And little did we know that it was going to come at just the right time because it was the day after the U.S. election. So a bunch of us were together, and I will forever associate that space with that very unique experience of coming together and sharing a drink, but also learning about something that took our minds off of a bit of the whiplash we had had.
Yeah, we definitely all needed a drink, but it was such a joyful experience, and I learned so much, and I was just so grateful to connect to this community of other Anglophones in Paris. So I actually think the timing was so perfect, and I'm so happy that that's where I ended up the day after the election. And I haven't tasted my gin now. I got to give it a go.
I haven't either. It's now been, she said it has to wait.
You let it marinate for about 3 weeks.
Right.
So like minimum 3 weeks. So I have to crack mine open and give it a taste and see how it is.
We're going to have to remember why we chose the botanicals we chose and all of that, which is sort of that the whole thing was such a fun and unique experience, which is obviously accessible to the public, just like they would sign up for a cooking class or a wine tasting. But what you are involved in, for the most part, are sort of these very out-of-the-box, super unique, atypical experiences, and getting to look and access spaces that no one even sort of realizes exist here. And you're also a food writer. That's how we originally met, was through journalism and our love of food. So, I mean, I'd love to sort of get a sense of how you got into this very specific world of these under the radar / totally unexpected experiences that you now help create or suss out, whether if it's a piece of real estate or if it's a property that could be used for a special event, sort of like, how does that happen? How does one get into this?
Yeah. It was not a career that I knew existed. It wasn't something that I could have applied for on a website, for example. I've kind of had to build my career from scratch as it goes along. And I think I feel very grateful to be in the right place at the right time in a lot of circumstances, and to be lucky enough to be in a position to strike when opportunities present themselves. So I first moved to Paris 12 years ago. And I had been getting my master's in food culture and communications at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy, which is...
Is that in Bologna?
So there's 2 campuses. So my campus was Parma, and then the other campus is Bra, which is near Alba in Torino. And then we were actually the last cohort that was at the Parma campus, and they moved it all to condense it to one location. So we had sort of the last hurrah there. So I got this master's in food culture and communications, and I think my parents thought I was going to live in their basement for the rest of my life, because they were like, what do you possibly do with this degree? And I really got it into my head that I wanted to do food writing with that degree. And so,
what do other people do with that degree?
It is so varied. So I have other friends who have gone into food media, who have been at, magazines like Bon Appetit, Better Homes and Gardens. I have other friends who left food entirely and have done things in real estate and in technology. I have a friend who started a chocolate company and became a chocolatier.
Oh, wow.
She now works in coffee marketing. I have another friend who worked as a sommelier for many years, and then she started to run a really incredible seed company. So it's a pretty holistic program with a really broad view of food. And then you get to do a stage, an internship where you kind of narrow in your focus. And I decided I wanted to narrow in my focus on food writing. And so that's sort of how I got my start, was doing an internship in food writing. And so I really was able to hone in on the Parisian food scene, develop my niche there. I then went back to the States for a year and a half, and I worked in commercial real estate and culinary strategy. So my job was to look at this $6 billion real estate portfolio throughout the States and identify what was needed from a food perspective at all the different properties. And then I would be flown in certain cases to help identify the right vendors, help recruit them, help them design their spaces.
Wow.
And my main project with the director of culinary strategy at that company was Union Market, which is
in Washington, D.C.,
in Washington,
right?
D.C.
Wow.
And I also launched Edible DC Magazine, which is a local food magazine, at the same time. So then I moved back to Paris to work full-time in food writing. And there's just so much that has kind of mushroomed out of that. And I think as a journalist, the way I always describe it is I get paid to be curious. So I get paid to be curious about other people's lives, to be curious about stories and histories. And I get to sort of dig into that. And so I get to meet really interesting people along the way.
Like your ham guy.
Like my ham guy.
And that is really a reference also to that beautiful essay you wrote. This was before COVID, right?
Yeah.
For Modern Love in the New York Times. And it was sort of an ode. I won't give too much away. I'll put a link, though, to the essay in the description of the show. But to the guy who is a charcutier. I mean, he works in ham.
Yeah.
In the Marais, and he has become a good friend of yours.
He's like my Parisian uncle here. And I had a number of people, because it's modern love and people expect that often to be romantic love. I had a number of people be like, oh, like, are you going to marry this man? And I have to be like, he is A, old enough to be my father, B, already married, and C, he is gay. So that was never in the cards for us, but it is, he is the purest love of my life. He is so special to me. And I did have one moment, this has never happened to me in my life, but there was a girl who had read the piece and she had gone to the shop and she saw me outside probably like 2 years ago. And she saw me and she said, oh my God, it's not bullshit. You're really here. It's like, I am here.
Yes, you practiced what you preach.
I was like, I did say I'm here all the time and I was not lying. I truly am there all the time. It's a very special shop. He makes the best chambon beurre in all of Paris, and he is the ham of the ham shop. So it's worth going just for his personality.
And there's often a line outside.
A crazy line, particularly, lunch hour, lunch rush. So
C'est caractère de cochon.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Good memory.
We'll come back around to sort of how the mushrooming opportunities, which I think is a great word to use for what happens to us here when you sort of fashion a career out of these things you love. But what was it about meeting him and discovering this place that was so special to you?
Yeah, I think for me, you hear people talk about the ways in which Paris is like a village. And I think for me, that was like the purest expression of it in my own life. And it's funny because that's not even technically my village. I don't live in that neighborhood, but I was going there so often with people who were visiting Paris, who wanted to kind of see the highlights of the best of Paris, that I was going so frequently, taking them to that shop. And it was just such a really powerful moment for me in my own life when I had unexpectedly left for a few weeks because my grandmother had passed away. He was calling all my friends, my coworkers, trying to figure out where I'd gone. And you think in a big city like Paris, sometimes you can feel anonymous. And that was a moment for me where I really realized how much the fabric of my day-to-day life was made up by these relationships that had so much meaning for me, and to then also see that it had meaning for him too and other people. That was really powerful for me. And I think also there's so many stories about moving to Paris for love, particularly as, an American woman. Mm-hmm. And I did not move to Paris for love. And I think it was really important for me to tell a love story that was about a wider community and about like creating a life that you love for yourself, and about the love that you receive from the people in your community, which for me is like the story of my life here. Like I feel so grateful for all the people I've met. And I think sometimes people have this idea of Parisians as unfriendly. because there can be a formality to life here. But I also feel like once you spend time here and you really dig in deep and you develop your relationships, it is a whole other city that is unveiled for you.
Absolutely.
There's so much that happens behind closed doors. There's so much. And so I always counsel people to keep coming back to Paris because I think it gets richer with every single visit. You come and you do all the major tourist sites at the beginning, but that's kind of exhausting. It's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the joy of life in Paris is when you give yourself permission to get lost. It's when you allow yourself to be a flaneur. It's when you kind of are able to wander the city and poke around a little bit more. And when you develop a relationship, even as a visitor, to become a local. Like if you go to the same coffee shop, 5 times in the week that you're here, if you go to the same bakery, it will start to be a different experience for you. People will start to remember you. They'll start to remember what you like. And it is a different experience of the city as a result.
It's so true. My 2 years ago, my dad was here this summer when a bakery was opening on, nearby. And he still talks about it. He's like, do you still go to that bakery? I loved their, whatever. I mean, I think he was just like obsessed with the bread.
Yeah.
And so I told them that he was coming back. He just recently visited and they were like, well, we have to give you a bag of treats to have ready for him, essentially, and they remembered him and they remembered his enthusiasm, which I think, is so refreshing also for them, not only as a new business, but as tried and true Parisians who, maybe don't get the like ecstatic energy from locals in the way that my dad came in and was like, geez, Louise.
Yeah.
I was like, so, I think that you can, as you say, get that as a visitor as well, when you really try to make a ritual.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for all the ways in which I've really tried to actively assimilate to life in France, I think American enthusiasm is something I always hold dear, that I want to guard for myself. And I love my American enthusiasm and my friends, my clients. So I think it's almost like a superpower in France in a certain way.
I think you're absolutely right. And so you talk about poking around, and through these relationships, you get to see things you wouldn't necessarily see. So would you say that's how you over the years have fallen into sort of this interesting role of a consultant, where you have this sort of real estate side, you have the event side, and you have these travel experiences side, and it offers a view on this city that you don't often get?
Yeah, I think, again, these are not things I necessarily planned to be doing, but people would come to me and ask me to do these things, and I would do it and I would enjoy it. So, coming out of the food writing, you get asked a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. People often want somebody to take them on a tour of the city, or they want somebody to plan an itinerary for them. So I got started doing a lot of sort of private luxury food travel things, taking people on private tours, developing itineraries for them. I'm building out a regional food tour this year, actually, in Normandy, called Battles, Bottles, Butter. That is World War II tourism, Calvados and cider, and cheese and butter tourism. But I started doing the luxury food tourism stuff like that. And I have certain tours that I offer on a fairly regular basis. And then I have certain private clients who have approached me who might ask for something really bespoke, really different. And that's where I've started sort of putting together the pieces of some of these places I've seen, either in my luxury real estate career or in my food writing career. And I'm able to sort of bring them into these really unusual spaces, provide some pretty exceptional experiences, and meet some incredible people along the way. And I feel proud of that because, as I said, Paris, a lot happens behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. And it really is such a relationship-based city. And when I think a lot about the States and France and kind of a big cultural difference, I think one is that in certain ways in America, it feels like at the end of the day, there's a price for everything. And I think there's actually a lot in France that money cannot buy.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like that's where someone like me comes in, is I have been here for almost 12 years. And there are these certain places or experiences that even money can't necessarily buy. And it comes down to the relationship and
someone willing to open the doors.
Someone willing to open the doors. And so I feel like what I try to do for people who approach me as a client is open the door to my Paris and to welcome them into my friendships, my relationships, the places I like to spend time, the places I'm taking, my dad when he comes to visit, the places I'm taking my friends to. And there's nothing I do with my clients that I would not be doing, for my own family or for my own friends.
But what are some of these sort of exceptional things that people have been able to experience?
Yeah. So recently, something that I've loved doing is privatizing my favorite apothecary, which also happens to have a cafe in it. At this point, I was there yesterday and they had a bouncer at the door because the lines were down the block. And so what we actually do is they will open up early for us before they open for the day. We go in, we do private shopping, we get to have a breakfast there. This past week, I actually did that in conjunction with a visit to a baker who's won the Best Butter Croissant competition twice. So we started with private shopping and breakfast in this stunning apothecary space. And then we went over to the bakery and we were able to make croissants, make baguettes, really get our hands dirty. And then, take them home with us after, which was really special. I have other clients where, we have privatized, my favorite chocolatier. We've gotten to go up into the laboratory. We had this amazing butcher shop. They were doing a private event that day. They were doing a taco event. But just for us, they did their classic steak frite. And they let us come and pick out the steak right in front of them. They cooked it in front of us, had it all ready and waiting when we arrived. We privatized a rare books library that has first editions of Proust for a champagne tasting, and it's just a truly stunning space. This past week, I worked with a friend who has a wine shop in a covered market, and we did a private dinner for 12 people after hours in the covered market with an incredible chef who's a dear friend who used to be the head chef at Clamato. He was at Septime, all these amazing restaurants. And so we had 12 wines from this wonderful winemaker, Emmanuel Reynaud.
Oh, yeah.
So, Reyes and a bunch of others from his portfolio, and really getting to have this intimate experience amongst wine lovers.
So how long does it take you to put together these sorts of, from the time someone says, I'm coming to Paris and I want something pretty out of the ordinary, how much time do you need to do something like that?
I never have enough time as I would like, would be the honest answer. At the end of the day, actually, a lot of my clients, it ends up being more last minute than you would think. And I have had to whip together some of these experiences like pretty rapidly, which I do feel quite proud of because it's not easy to make a lot of these things happen. And it's particularly not easy last minute. So I would love to have more lead time than I frankly have had, but I can make things happen very rapidly when they need to. Pretty much everything I do is, private and bespoke for people. So I'm used to adapting to different dietary restrictions, different timelines. Some people things change a lot, within their schedule. And so you do have to be very flexible and very adaptable. And that's where I feel really grateful for the strength of the relationships that I've cultivated.
For sure, because that can be very tricky to navigate.
It can be super tricky to navigate.
People sometimes ask me, like, why don't you switch up your route?
Yeah.
And I don't mean people as in my clients. I mean sort of like friends will say, oh, you're always sort of taking them in the same places. It's like, well, because if you have to build that connection with someone else or start that with someone else and something goes awry or there's a cancellation or something, it just puts strain. And so I prefer to stick to sort of that comfort. But, eventually you got to expand.
That's where I have like a two-tiered system, right? I have like the tours that I offer very regularly where it's, an extremely sort of regular route for me. And then there's other stuff that I'm just kind of crafting one-off for people.
You also do stuff for brands and companies. And I remember this summer, I mean, I'm not surprised now that I think about it that you were involved in finding this space, but for the Olympics, that brand Athletica did this amazing wellness yoga pop-up with different events and conferences, and there were some athletes there, and I got to do a yoga class in there. And first of all, this space was just exquisite.
It's
and
extraordinary.
You found it.
Well, I can't take credit. I can't take credit for finding the space because Elaine Hunsinger, the amazing acupuncturist, actually found the space, who we both love. So she found the space, but I was involved with Agence Bébé from Blair Bechet. She got me involved on doing some of the culinary programming within that space.
Okay.
So I brought in some incredible chefs who I've worked with on a couple different events. It was all around female empowerment. So we wanted a really strong team of female chefs. We used only female winemakers from the Paris Wine Company portfolio. And it is an extraordinary space. And I see some of the most exceptional real estate in Paris because I am a luxury real estate consultant on the sort of vacation rental end of things. I work with many different agencies at this point. And that space, even after seeing everything that I get to see, that space really stands out for me in terms of how thoughtful they are, what an unusual space it is, the things that they have built into that space, the incredible artwork. I mean,
just exquisite. So I guess, speaking of spaces then, what are some of the craziest things you've seen then?
Yeah.
Aside from that one.
There was an incredible full house in Paris, which always is impressive when you see a full house and not just an apartment, where you walk in and it feels like a museum, or it feels like something that you would see in a movie about Paris. And it turns out that they had actually found the archives from the 1800s from the original owners, and they had gone back to every single atelier that still existed and had worked with them to refurbish the house in all the original colors. I mean, it was a dedication to preserving that unique history of that space. And for me, it was like, oh, wow, the level of attention, of care, and really putting the money into these very artisanal operations. That was really special for me to see.
That is a property that gets rented out?
It's a property that gets rented out. It gets rented out for film shoots. It gets rented out by private travelers. And, some of these spaces that I get to see, you just don't realize that things like that exist. You don't realize that there are pools in the Latin Quarter. You don't realize.
I'm not surprised you just mentioned the Latin Quarter, because the one time I went to something, it was some sort of wellness retreat, and it was multiple floors, and there was a garden, and so no pool, but a neighbor had a pool.
Yeah.
And you sort of look around and you're like, where am I? How is this real in this city?
Yeah, exactly. And I think getting to work in luxury real estate, I get to see these beautiful spaces. I get to meet some really interesting people. And coming out of that, for some of my corporate clients, I have been able to do some really exceptional events in these spaces. And I had somebody who approached me recently for a big sort of tech launch, and they said, I was looking online and I could not find that apartment that you had done an event at back in March. And I said, it's not online. This is not a place that you can typically rent out for a rental. It's because I have a relationship with this agency, and they knew, that I'm doing something corporate. It's not going to be a wild party.
Right.
But we wanted something really special that would feel so different than your average corporate happy hour. So we had this stunning apartment overlooking the Louvre, the Tuileries, incredible view of the Eiffel Tower, exceptionally designed. Like the family that owns it just has such an eye for design and aesthetics. And so every person who came through that door was like, how did you find this place? and I really take so much pride in terms of how my brain is able to weave these different threads together. Mm-hmm. And I've learned a lot about ADHD actually in the last year. And I'm someone with ADHD. And I think actually this is a moment for me where I see the ways in which my ability to weave together these disparate interests and worlds is really a gift. And when you first explain it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because you're like, food, luxury real estate, journalism,
but it does.
Tourism.
It does. You're bringing, food is a component of all of this regardless.
Yes, exactly. And that's always the thread at any event, any tour that I do is food and good wine is always at the base. And then in this past year, I really tried to bring in music, art, these multi-sensory experiences, which for me just takes it a notch above your standard dinner, for example.
Well, we have to talk about that, because I was at one of those dinners at the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature, which is the hunting and nature and hunting museum, right?
Yes, exactly.
Which is phenomenal. I mean, it's one of my favorite museums. But you not only had this vegan tasting menu built around botanicals and the sound of and music. So your friend who basically creates music from the energy from produce, right,
exactly.
Fruits and vegetables, and you're like, huh? But you got it into a space that was so perfectly matched for that sort of focus, which was this museum. And we then had a private tour of the museum after the meal. And that is just not something that should happen very often, I think. But when it does, you sort of want to be on the list, or at least figure out how to get tickets to it. And that was a ticketed event. So is that something you're hoping to do more of in the coming year?
Yes, it's something I'm definitely going to be doing more of in the coming year. it's something I've really enjoyed doing. And when I can open it up to more people in that way beyond like a private client, I really love to do that. And I think for me, it was really special working with a team, first of all, who are all friends of mine, who I just dearly respect. But working with the museum, the Musée de la Chasse for me is one of the most avant-garde museums in Paris. It's in this beautiful traditional mansion, essentially, but it's super avant-garde. And I thought they might be a little freaked out because they have this private hunting club.
Right.
And if we do a vegan tasting menu in the private hunting club, is that going to mess with them a little bit? And they were actually really excited. And they said, we're the Museum of the Hunt, but people forget we're the Museum of Nature as well. And
Exactly.
so I think they were really excited to play on the nature end of things. And I think when you eat vegan in certain ways, there's this sense of being virtuous with it. And particularly when you're in a place like a private hunting club, with dead animals, taxidermied animals around you, you have this moment of sort of feeling maybe pride in eating vegan. But because we were working with Casey Barth of Botanical Sound, who's connecting sensors directly into these plants, and he's creating this live electronic music that is responsive to human touch, where you interact with the plants, like you touch the strawberries, and the strawberries, there's an effect on the music and the energy that's created.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it ended up being quite emotional and a little uncomfortable in certain ways, because when you realize you're tapping into the energy of this plant as a living being, but then we're also there to consume it, all of a sudden that sort of virtue of like, oh, we're eating vegan surrounded by all these dead animals, there's a reckoning, I guess, that you have to go through yourself.
It's a questioning. You definitely are aware of your surroundings, and it just spurs introspection, let's say.
Yeah, and I think it spurred what I was so happy with that event was the ways in which people afterwards, not every single person, but almost every person said to me, I feel like I was at the best table. And for me, if everyone walks away feeling like
I was at the best table,
at
Catherine.
the best table, I feel like I've done my job appropriately. But a lot of people have really kept in touch. And so I think, I think what I like about creating these kinds of experiences that are open to a wider audience is I think people are really hungry for connection. I think people are really hungry for community. And I think creating these kinds of outside the box, very unusual experiences, it's a really easy entry point to connect with people in maybe a deeper and more unexpected way, because you are doing something really unusual. And so it gives you kind of it's a self-selective group of people, first of all, who go, but then you also have some pretty deep connections, I feel like, that can come out of it as a result.
Well, if you think about the people who were at your event, you have people who are in wine, people who are in food, people who are not in any of the, either of those fields, people who are artistic, pastry chefs, it's a very good way of trying to bring people together who at the base, at least, are interested in food experiences, right? And then you sort of push it as far as it can go. And today, that's what people are also looking for. If they're going to go back to the same place over and over again, yes, the going to the coffee shop and the same, boulangerie is part of that experience, but also maybe trying to see, how do you tap in to what that city can offer in a different way? And also, but it gets challenging, right? Because then you have to constantly impress people.
You do, but I love to keep trying to impress people. I love to keep learning. I love to keep meeting new people. And I really always try to challenge myself. And so for every new client, I'm always trying to do something a little different. And so I had tech clients who approached me because they had gone to this event I had done for a deep tech conference back in March. And they said, we really loved what you did. We want to do something similar. And I said, okay, but we're not going to use the same apartment. We're not going to use the same chefs. Like, you are going to have some of the same people. So we're going to keep this fresh, and we're going to keep pushing this so that people don't get bored, because I don't want to get bored either. And
no.
When I was doing the yoga event during the Olympics, one of the events was for the US triathlon team. And so we tried to weave in the elements of the sport. So we had a rosé from a female winemaker that was called Piscine Olympique, which is Olympic swimming
I know
pool.
I know that one.
And we did Paris-Brest as the dessert with like a Normandy twist, because the two female chefs are opening like a restaurant and hotel in Normandy. And so Paris-Brest is a circular dessert that was developed for the bike race from Paris to Brest. And then what else? Oh, we had runny cheese. So we had croque monsieur.
Runny cheese.
We got a little lazy maybe on the running element, but we tried to have each element of like triathlon in there. So runny cheese in the croque monsieur. And again, the clients may never notice these details, but it's for me like the pride and the integrity that I take in my work. I want to make it special for each person.
Sure.
So I always try to do special things like that. And if somebody comes to me with a wild request, I'm always trying to make those things happen. And usually I can pull it off.
Well, this is why I send people to you when they want something completely like out of left field and bespoke in a way that it just feels that's Catherine's terrain. I definitely get a bit nervous with the I want to do something that I've never done before. And I have I have very high expectations. I'm sort of like, okay, I don't want to say it's panic. It's just, I'm less equipped for that. And there are people who are better suited.
I thrive on the adrenaline of it.
Apparently. So we are literally, when this runs, this is going to be December. There's a lot happening in Paris right now. Notre Dame is reopening next weekend.
I know. It doesn't even feel real. It's so exciting.
It's going to be a madhouse. I reported something very factual just about how you go about visiting it, and there will be a reservation feature now on the website and on an app. So, obviously that's going to be something people are going to come for. There are going to be Christmas markets. There's going to be, the museums all have these big exhibits that they delayed since the Olympics took up so much time. But I'm sort of wondering if you had to name sort of an experience that you would recommend for people to do, not necessarily pricey, just sort of something to do while they're here in December, and maybe someplace to eat that feels really special to you.
So one of the things that I feel really excited about is the ice skating in the Grand Palais. That's going to be returning. I think it's December 14th through January 8th. So that's going to be returning because that feels like one of those inside of a snow globe kind of Hallmark movie moments. So I think that's quite special.
Because the Grand Palais just reopened for the Olympics.
Exactly.
And won't open actually to the public with exhibits until next year.
Yeah. So it's
sort of like a preview.
It's a preview. It's a fun moment, I think, to kind of sneak back in. And also, ice skating anywhere in Paris feels quite special. And it's such a limited amount of time. So I think that's something that's really fun right now. I love restaurants where I can feel really cozy that are serving hearty, warming food. I love it when there's a fireplace. So there's Cafe Mirabelle in the 11th, which has a wonderful fireplace with like actual wood burning logs inside of it. They are Alsatian.
Yes, they do good pastry.
And you feel like you're in Alsace when you're there. They do good pastry. They have nice hot chocolates, like a pain d'épices, like a gingerbread spiced hot chocolate. They do flamme couche at night, which are like thin crusted, tarte flambée that are cooked in the wood burning oven. So that's really cozy. Tomorrow I'm going to Le Doyenné, which I'm very excited about, which is a little bit of a trek outside the city, but it's a short train ride or you can take an Uber. And I'm going to go early to take advantage of having an aperitif by the crackling fire.
Yes, you have to.
And see the beautiful farm, like through that giant sort of glassed in space where I think you feel warm and cozy inside, kind of looking outwards to the frost and to the fields. So those are two places that I'm really excited to be going to take advantage of feeling cozy and anything involving wild game. Right now, it is the season. So places like Repère de Cartouche.
Love that place.
I love it. I am obsessed.
They have an amazing Sunday brunch, which is like poulet rôti and endless fries. And
it is the best all-you-can-eat buffet, basically, of my life. I think it's 49 euros a person, but he literally wrote the book on pâtés and terrines. And so you start and there's a giant pâté terrine buffet. This time of year, there would often be oysters as well. Then you have the roasted chicken, usually with morel mushroom cream sauce, amazing fries, then a giant Normandy cheese platter, and then a huge dessert buffet of mousse au chocolat, île flottante. His pot de crème are exceptional. He even makes like the langue de chat cookies himself.
Oh gosh.
So that's another really special place to go in the winter.
But you were saying wild game is sort of the thing right now.
Wild game, exactly. Yeah. And wild game and then shellfish too. Like this is a big time of year for seafood. So you see oysters, outside of a Franprix, which is just our normal grocery store. There's oyster stands. I love going to the Baron Rouge, which for me is a cultural experience. They will, bring in an oysterman. They'll be shucking it outside on the sidewalk. on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, people will be bundled up outside, hunched over recycling bins. Like the cars are littered with oyster shells on top. The toilet is literally a pit in the ground. I would recommend going to the bathroom beforehand. But it is a rare place that you end up making new friends always. Like there's an informality there that is not typical of Paris. And so you end up stepping on somebody's foot or like splashing your wine on them. And then you end up sharing a platter of charcuterie and you're drinking, wine direct from the barrel, hunched over your trash can, eating the oysters. But it is like one of my most beloved experiences.
Hey, look, I'd rather do that here than in a place like New York City. So,
and it's a unique Paris, cultural experience. I feel like when you were there. So yeah, I think those are some of my favorite winter traditions. Bon Marché also is always great around the holidays.
That's my favorite department store. If you're gonna
department store, I feel like Bon Marché is the way to do it. Like the Christmas windows are beautiful. They always work with amazing artists to be doing such cool installations. And if you're traveling here, the Grande Épicerie, it's a little expensive for some of the products you can find elsewhere, but you cannot beat the ease of like one-stop shopping to just kind of load up on everything.
And they have a massive wine cellar. I think it's like the biggest, one of the broadest selections in the entire city. Now, if you're into natural wine, I don't think that's going to be your source, but it's an impressive place to visit, even if you only take home like a bar of chocolate.
No, exactly. And even if you're not shopping at all, just like feasting with your eyes on everything, it's worth the visit.
That's a very worthy reminder. Catherine, where can people find you to either read up on what you do or contact you for, bespoke experiences?
So I have a Substack newsletter, Chow Down. So chow as in like Italian hello.
Yes, I will put that in the notes.
Thank you. I have my website, which is catherinedown.com, or you can find me on Instagram at catherine.down.
Catherine, this is so, it's so fun to talk to you about this and to also get a sense of how you see the city and the connections you've made and how they might be different from mine or my friends or whoever, and realize that this community is really actually, that's what this is actually. It's just a big community that's very special. And I love knowing what moves you, and especially when it comes to food. So keep writing, keep exploring, and keep telling us what's good.
Thank you. And I love having you be part of my community. So thank you for having me here today to share all of this.
That's the show for today. Thanks for listening, as always. If you're streaming this on Spotify, be sure to check out a little poll that awaits you pertaining to this discussion. Just scroll down on the episode page within the app and vote. And if you enjoy the show, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, share with a friend, and pick up the books that inspired it, The New Paris and The New Parisienne. Until next time, à bientôt.